This is Greyhound Nation, Episode 16, recorded March 21st, 2021. Greyhound Rehoming in the UK with Paula Beniston. Greyhound Nation is a podcast for Greyhound enthusiasts produced by Greyhound enthusiasts. To learn more about our show and its hosts, visit our website at greyhoundnation.dog. That's greyhoundnation.dog. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Greyhound Nation podcast. I'm Michael Burns. Now, here's your host, John Parker.
Welcome back, everybody. You know, Greyhound adoption is a worldwide phenomenon now, and we're happy to have an international guest with us today, Paula Beniston, who's the Rehoming coordinator for the Greyhound Board of Great Britain. Paula, welcome.
Many thanks for inviting me.
So tell us a little bit about your background in Greyhounds, when you got your first Greyhound, how you got into Greyhound rehoming, and so forth.
So it actually started just over 30 years ago. That's giving my age away a bit. When I was 18 and working at a local supermarket while I went to college. And I really wanted to get into working with animals. So I went to, I used to live in Hampshire, which is in the southeast of England. And on the outskirts, there was a village called Church Crookham, and where I actually went to work on every Sunday for 8 hours on a Sunday for 10 whole pounds a day, was actually at a Greyhound training and breeding centre, which was fantastic, because I didn't find out until probably 10 years later that you very seldom get the opportunity to see Greyhound puppies. But actually I worked with them and went into their paddocks and got climbed all over and everything. So that was a really good start to my animal welfare side of things. Absolutely fantastic facility. They did the training of the racing greyhounds as well. And then on the side, they also did rehoming of all sorts of breeds that needed assistance in finding homes. So 30 years ago, had the same welfare that we have today. It much improved, I imagine, today. Oh, I know it is. So yeah, that was a really good start. And then life, career, family came along, and then got reintroduced into the greyhound and lurcher scene probably 10 years later, when I was roughly 28. And that's when I actually got my first greyhound as well. I actually took him in as a foster, and never gave him up. I'm one of those failed fosterers who is
that's
really
what
rubbish.
we call them that over here as well. I'm a failed foster.
I'm really rubbish at fostering. Not many actually leave the home. So yeah, he was my first greyhound, and that was 20 years ago now. And have
you had one ever since?
No, sometimes I've had the because I actually volunteered for 18 years with the Greyhound and Lurcher charity. I have had quite a few lurchers as well. So I have just one greyhound now, Blake, who's just over the age of 2 now. But I've had over the last 20 years, I've fostered over 100 greyhounds and lurchers and kept quite a few, like you do. My second greyhound that I was supposed to foster, he had liver failure, and the people who had him were unable to keep him because they had ill health themselves. So I took him on board, couldn't bear the thought of him not having his forever home, so adopted him more or less straight away, and he was given 6 months to live, and actually I had him for 18 months, and they were the best 18 months. And by that stage, I actually had my own kennels and my own rehoming centre, and he just used to loll up alongside me when I went to kennels to see the other greyhounds, and then loll back home because it was on site, so I had 2 acres. And yeah, he just had that freedom the last period of time of his life. So, and he was cat friendly as well. which was great.
Yeah. So you started out at fostering for a Greyhound rehoming organization. What was the name of it?
So at the time, that was called Greyhound Rescue West of England. They're now called Forever Hounds Trust, and I was with them for 18 years.
And then it sounded like you started your own rehoming.
No, I had the homing centre through their charity. So
okay.
Yeah, it's a weird story because we always rented kennels, privately owned kennels, and it was my job to actually go around trying to see if I could kennels in this sort of Somerset and Bristol area. And I was really struggling. So then I just decided to start seeing if anyone would sell one to me so we could continue the charitable work. And after half a dozen phone calls, found someone who was willing to sell. So I bought it so that we didn't lose this particular area's rehoming section. So I had full backup and support of volunteers and the charity itself. So it wasn't me on my own. Stick work. So, and I think we homed between 150 and 200 greyhounds a year from that particular site, which wasn't too bad. And I ran it for 7 years.
How did you come to be hired as the rehoming coordinator for the Greyhound Board of Great Britain?
So when you get into the Greyhound side of things, especially in the UK, it's almost like a family environment where you just get to know so many people through the charitable side and through the sport side of it. So as soon as I was made aware that there was a position becoming available, I sent in my CV with a covering letter on why I felt I would be the best person for the job, and then waited to see whether I was successful on the first stage. I was then, and this was at the sort of last year before the pandemic hit. I got shortlisted, had an interview arranged for the 1st of April, which I found quite humorous because obviously it's April Fool's Day. thought I'd go to the interview with maybe odd socks that no one could see, but just to keep it real. And that then got delayed because obviously we went into full lockdown at the end of March. Got delayed, and there was no real guarantee on when it may actually reopen up for applications. So and then got contacted in June, July time to say that they were going to continue the position and invite me to interview. Had the first interview, then got shortlisted further, and then had a second interview where it was sort of a task where you had to produce what your objectives and targets would be for the first year and what your expectations would be by the end of that first year of the scheme. And then I think it was only 1 or 2 days later when I was notified that I'd actually got the position. I think I might have squealed.
I can imagine.
Because I was so excited. Just the perfect role for me to have, really.
Are you is it a new position? You're the first person to hold it?
Yes. Yeah. Brand new scheme that actually went live on the 1st of September last year. And I actually started my role on the 17th of August, 2 weeks before. And basically spent 2 weeks manically getting processes in place so that ready for when the scheme went live on the 1st of September. So
yeah, that's great. That's every Greyhound adoption volunteer's dream job, I would think.
I imagine so. I feel very, very lucky and very proud to be sitting where I am today, even though it's absolutely at
home. Tell us a little bit about how Greyhound rehoming works in the UK in terms of independent groups, networks of groups. We have the Greyhound Pets of America network here in the US. What's the comparable to that in the UK?
So we have a large amount of homing centres in the UK. Obviously, there are a larger ones that have mixed breeds. We've got Greyhound Trust, who have approximately 40 branches under their charity, and we have lots of independents as well. So currently, at the moment, I've got 125 UK homing centres approved to be partners with us at the GBGB for the rehoming side of things. They all, there's criteria for all of them to join. Want to see proof of their kennel situation, making sure the kennels are the right size for the dog, that they have raised beds, raised water and food bowls, enrichment side, the daily exercise routine, all those things that you would expect to find in a homing centre for any breed of dog, to be honest. They become approved homing centres with GBGB, and there is a link on our website so that any greyhound owner, trainer, stadium can actually look on our website and see a link for where their nearest homing centre is available in their area. So with the adoption side of things, all the homing centres will have a homing policy, a returns policy, and a euthanasia policy. The homing policy is basically ensuring they match the greyhound to the right home and lifestyle of that particular family, rather than the other way around. It's not that they're actually shown 20 greyhounds and then are handed the one prettiest colour, or it's the greyhound that matches their environment and their lifestyle. They then go through the speaking with this is the homing centre side, they go through speaking with the potential adopter. They'll have the adopter will have a home check carried out. At the moment, because of the restrictions we have here, they are virtual ones where you might FaceTime and have a look around the property in that way, just making sure they have a secure garden and the environment where they will sleep, etc. And then it's a case of making sure that there's a greyhound that fits their environment and lifestyle, like I said before. And then they complete the adoption paperwork, take the greyhound in with them. If they've got other pets or other dogs, then they'll be invited to the actual homing centre to introduce the dogs before they go into the permanent home environment. So it's all worked out quite smoothly, and really to ensure that greyhound gets its forever home after retiring as an athlete, and it also cuts down on the amount of potential returns that you get from greyhounds that then don't necessarily suit that home.
Yeah. What's the interface between the GBGB's program and the it used to be called the Retired Greyhound Trust, and now it's called the Greyhound Trust. How do you interact with that organization at all?
Yes. So I used to actually work for them. I used to be their head of finance. I had to leave, unfortunately, because personal circumstances. My dad was at end of life, so because it was it was so far away from me where I actually live, I left there to care for my dad. But what's really great is that I built up relationships with the branches while I was at Greyhound Trust, and then obviously I had colleagues that I worked with at their head office. And it's fantastic because obviously I'm now back in the Greyhound loop, as it were, and still work with them very closely, sometimes on a daily basis. So it's a good relationship that.
So can Greyhound Trust branches, are they also possibly on the GBGB's approved
They
list?
are, yes. Yeah. All their branches are actually on our approved list. They were approved automatically, had a 30-40 year relationship with them. So from the 1st of September, because of the history and the working together, they were approved automatically because we'd worked with them for so many years before. What's changed is that we now have obviously the independence that because we financially supported Greyhound Trust, and they were kind of the only, the main homing charity that we actually supported financially with 1.3 million a year. But it meant that the smaller independents that also took in our greyhounds didn't actually receive any funding at all. So the Greyhound Retirement Scheme has evened that up a bit, so that the bond that we pay across and GBG matches the fund for goes with the greyhound, that particular individual greyhound. So whichever homing centre it goes to, whether it's an independent smaller one, a multi-breed or Greyhound Trust, there is a £400 that goes with that greyhound to that particular centre.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. That's a relatively new scheme, isn't it?
Yes, it started on the 1st of September 2020. It's so any GBGB registered greyhound that was registered on or after the 1st of September 2020 is automatically required to have the bond paid by the owner for it to enter the scheme.
And how much is the bond?
So the bond is £200 for an Irish bred greyhound. There's a dispensation at the moment, so until the end of August this year, it was for there to be £100 paid initially, and the other £100 paid by the time that greyhound retired. New scheme, so we needed to be very conscious, aware that with a new scheme and £200, we needed to make it so that it was affordable for the greyhound owners and trainers. But also for any greyhounds that were registered before the 1st of September, they can voluntarily be registered on the scheme with the £200. And then when their greyhound, and even if it's the day before the greyhound is retired or goes to the homing centre, they can pay that bond, and we will match the funds and send £400 across to the approved homing centre. British bred dogs, there's a dispensation for 2 years, which ends 31st of August 2022, where they pay £100, and GBGB pays £300. So it's still £400 that goes to the homing centre, takes that individual greyhound in, but the owner only needs to pay £100. We're trying to encourage more British breeding and
Yeah. So the owner, the racing owner, pays the funds, whatever the amount may be, into, I guess, like an investment account that's held by the GBGB, where the funds sit until such time as that particular greyhound is retired.
Yes. So it's a bond account specifically for this scheme only. If you look at it as being a pension fund for the greyhound, for each and every greyhound, best way to look at it.
Right. And then so the greyhound, basically, when it's retired, it comes with a dowry, so to speak, for the rehoming. The rehoming center gets the funds and then is applying that to care of the greyhound, vetting, and so forth, while it's waiting to be rehomed.
Yeah. Potentially the travel costs of doing a home check for the prospective adopter. So it's specifically for the homing costs that are incurred by the homing centres to help alleviate that side of things.
Yeah. How's the participation rate of that been so far among the owners?
Overwhelming. It's been fantastic. So I checked the figures today. Actually, I am actually an accountant as well, so I am a figures person. So I had a look earlier today, and we currently have just under 5,000 greyhounds that are registered on the scheme, of which 1,300 were voluntarily registered. So it means they were registered as GBGB dogs before the 1st of September. So we've had just over 1,300 of those. And the scheme went live, I think, we're in month 7 now. And there have been 1,200 greyhounds that have actually been entered into the scheme, and the Homing Centre has received £400 for that particular greyhound. So that's over 1,200 greyhounds that have actually gone through the scheme in its entirety in just under 7 months.
Yeah, that's great. And so that's entirely the GBGB's program. It's not related to the Greyhound Trust.
No, it includes Greyhound Trust. So Greyhound Trust would have got some of that funding as well. So every greyhound that actually entered a Greyhound Trust branch or an independent homing centre got £400 for that greyhound going in.
Yeah.
So the 1,200 that have actually gone to homing centres include Greyhound Trust branches as well.
Okay. And is the each rehoming center, I take it, does it in addition to the bond scheme, that the funds that it receives through that, does its own fundraising to some extent as well? Is that accurate?
It does, yes. Now, because of the situation with COVID, the fundraising side for the homing centres has depleted massively, because normally what they do is they go to pet shops and sort of shopping centres and promote their work. So this scheme has come at just at the right time, because their fundraising activities have been reduced quite majorly. So it's been fantastic, because we've not only started a new scheme, but it's given a lifeline to the smaller charities, especially that may not have survived, without our additional funding as well. So from my side, it's just been fantastic. And
Yeah.
The owners and the stadiums here have really supported the scheme as well, which is why it's been it's been so positive from pretty much day one. I never expected to have 1,200 dogs going through the scheme, being rehomed, finding their forever home within 7 months. I mean, I would have expected greyhounds to find their forever home, but this amount through the scheme, which is more or less voluntary paid, because it's more the greyhounds that were registered before the 1st of September that are actually at their retirement side of things.
Yeah. Before the bond scheme began, did the GBGB to some extent fund greyhound rehoming?
Yes,
out of its own funds?
So beforehand, BGRF, which is the British Racing Greyhound Fund, that's where all our welfare funds come from, and it was the BGRF that would actually send the 1.3 million across to Greyhound Trust. So there was always funding before the scheme came into place, but it was to one specific homing charity.
And will that fund continue even after the bond scheme is fully operational and everybody's participating, or will the bond scheme become the primary means of financing rehoming?
No, so it is already the primary way of funding the retirement of our greyhounds, because of the situation with the pandemic, with funds being lower than we would normally expect. Even we've had our funding cut to a degree just because of the circumstances that the pandemic has brought. So this is in place now, and the Greyhound Trust branches, like the independents, are receiving the funds for each greyhound that they take in.
And what about the tracks? Now, I know with the pandemic, their ability to help fund rehoming has been reduced, but pre-COVID, so to speak, what was the tracks participation in Greyhound?
So the actual tracks and stadiums have always had welfare at the heart of what they do as well. So they've always helped support their local branches, potentially some of the independents that I now have on our approved centre list. And with the Greyhound Retirement Scheme, it's actually obviously worked even better, because they're very pro the scheme that is in place. and still offer that assistance to individual homing centres and that as well. So it's been very positive.
Do the tracks typically have a spot in the track facility where the fans come through where you can promote Greyhound rehoming?
Yes, absolutely. So I know that, I mean, obviously at the moment there's not sort of audience participation at the moment. We're still in a fairly strict lockdown situation. But prior to this, homing charities would actually go and fundraise, and even the tracks themselves would do fundraising to assist with the homing side of things. So they always offered space in their reception or somewhere where people who were attending the races would be able to see and speak with the homing charity side of things. So that's been in place for a long time, way before the scheme came into place.
Yeah. What I think that you folks over there have had some of the same challenges that we in the U.S. had back in the early days of some of the myths about greyhounds and what kind of pets they make and whether they need a lot of room, or they have to have they have to run every day and so forth. What were some of the things you encountered over there in the UK when you got started in greyhound adoption?
So the main thing I remember, and like I say, we're talking 20 years ago when I first started volunteering with a greyhound charity, is, don't they need loads of exercise? Well, we all know that going out, being able to run freely in a secure paddock or field, they last about 5-10 minutes before before you're dragging them back to get home. And then they become your living rug, don't they, in your home, either on the sofa or on a rug. You don't normally hear a peep out of them for a good, couple of hours after that. They're sprinters. They're not, long distance runners at all. So, yeah, basically just, last 20 years raising awareness on that side of things, that they don't need loads of exercise. They're brilliant pets to have for older people who, don't want to bend down to pick up a chihuahua, or, they're I don't know if they're less of a trip hazard because of the way that they lie down across most of the floor, but yeah, they're just, and that's one of the things we're doing, is promoting. This year we're doing everything we can to promote how great pets greyhounds make. It's part of the remit this year to get it out there.
Well, I understand that you've had the same phenomenon in the UK during the lockdown. One of the few good things that's come out of the pandemic is just a flurry of applications. Everybody's interested. They're home. They can take in a dog. We've had that here in the U.S. Between that and, word got out about the Florida tracks closing, and so everybody was worried about who didn't know that, in fact, every greyhound coming out of Florida would be snapped up quickly. There was that. So we had the double effect of the people being at home so much, and then the Florida. How about in England? Did you have just a flurry of
yes.
Lockdown applications?
Yes, we did, and we still have them. It's a bizarre situation out of something that has sort of shocked the world. The amount of greyhounds, and actually all dog breeds, that have been bought or homed. I'm sure it's happening over your side of the water as well, that prices of designer dogs, as I call them, have tripled in some places. So whereas we've had potentially a waiting list of greyhounds waiting to go into a homing centre, we don't have that now. It's more a case of us taking phone calls from the centre saying, do you have any greyhounds that you are looking, that are going to retire shortly, because we have space. So it's completely turned upside down our Greyhound rehoming situation. It will change, and there's obviously where we've not had the racing, it's been cut down quite a degree through the situation over the last year. And our registrations went down last year, which means that going forward in the future, we're going to see a dip in a few years' time for the greyhounds that were registered in this last year. Going through retirement will reduce down, but numbers are now picking up again. We are lucky that our sport has managed to keep greyhound racing. I think we were the first to reopen safely when we could do. So registrations are now picking back up again for the greyhounds in the UK.
Do most rehoming centers currently have a backlog of applications and not enough greyhounds to fulfill the applications?
There is the potential for that. There is more of a demand for greyhounds than we have greyhounds that meet that. But there are, because of our kind of a unique situation here at the moment, there are greyhounds coming over from Ireland as well. So, if our homing centres have spaces, they are also in touch with Ireland to take on some of their greyhounds that need rehoming as well.
Yeah, I've seen that on the Irish Retired Greyhound Trust Facebook page, groups of 25, 30 greyhounds coming to England, not to race, but to be rehomed.
Rehomed, yes, absolutely, yes. So there will come a time when everything goes back to a bit more normality, that we will probably have enough of our own UK greyhounds that need rehoming. But it's great to, we're all here for the same reason and for the same purpose, to make sure our athletes, find their forever home at the end of their career. So
yeah. Well, you mentioned being a numbers person. How are the numbers of greyhounds that are rehomed in the UK tracked? How do you keep up with, we rehomed X number of greyhounds in 2019, X number in 2020, et cetera? How do you track that?
So we have a green form, as we call it, green retirement form, that actually every owner has to complete when their greyhound finishes racing, whether it's that they're being told to move on to another person, whether the greyhound is going to a homing centre to find their retirement home, or if they're going for breeding. So that has to be completed. We have a CRM database that for each individual greyhound, that shows their history, at which track, when they last raced. So that's monitored closely. So if we haven't had a green retirement form, say 4 months after that dog's not being seen racing at a track anymore, we will then send a reminder to the owner that to find out where that greyhound is. So we have a really, really good mechanism in place to make sure that we know where our greyhounds are.
And then is there a clearinghouse of information where the rehoming centers will report in quarterly or annually to say, okay, in this year we rehomed X number of greyhounds, so you can track that kind of into from the owner to the rehoming center, and then ultimately to the adopted owner?
So the homing centers notify us as well anyway. So when the green form retirement form is completed, it's completed by the owner with the greyhound's racing name, their ear markings, and then the information is put of which homing centre that greyhound went to. So we're aware of that anyway. But we also have a online database, and actually we're going to be rolling it out to all of our approved homing centres. We're actually linked with our registry database so that they can put the information in on their homing centre side, keep all the details of that greyhound, the vet details, any treatment, what donation, adoption fee or donation they receive for that greyhound, kind of the full history. And then some of that information is automatically ported over to our registry database. So we're trying to go a bit more paperless rather than having these retirement forms. So that's something that's happening now. And there's also owners and trainers portals that we're setting up where they can go online to be able to register where their greyhound has gone, retired, breeding.
Yeah.
Transfer of ownership. So we're trying to make it a lot more simplified as well.
And is there a way for adopters to register themselves as the new owners of the greyhounds?
So that's all down to the microchipping side of things. The microchip records for that greyhound will be there. We as long as we know where which homing centre the greyhound went to, needed further information on a greyhound, if it got picked up because it had escaped from the house or anything, then what we would do is we'd get in touch with the homing centre and then get the details of the owner if the new owner if we needed to. But we tend to let the homing centres do their bit, and it's very few and far circumstances where we need that interaction for a greyhound that's been found wandering anywhere.
Yeah. What pre-COVID? What were the approximate numbers? In other words, how many greyhounds in England were being retired from racing and not being retained by their owners to be breeding stock or pets? What was the general number of greyhounds that the rehoming centers were basically charged with finding homes for?
So if I take the 2019 average figures, we tend to have 6,500 to 7,500 greyhounds retiring each year. So a fair amount of greyhounds. So that's probably a good average to work on, 6,500 to 700,000. Greyhound Trust would normally home between 3,000 to 3,500 of those. And then independents, and then you'd have, like you said, the owners of the original owners of the greyhounds, keeping them as pets.
Do you have a feel for? It seems like, from what I've seen, the process of direct owner rehoming. They place their racing greyhound with a family member or a friend, or they keep it themselves as a pet. What do you have a feel for? What percentage of retiring greyhounds fall into that category in terms of that they never go into the rehoming center because they're kept or placed privately by their owner?
Yeah, so I imagine that would be around 5 to 10%. It would be a small number, just because most owners tend to retire a greyhound and then look to getting another one to race as an athlete. So it is a smaller amount. The majority do go for rehoming. There are some that obviously go for breeding, and some that are sold on and potentially go to flapping tracks. We don't license or regulate the flapping tracks, but the good thing is if they're a greyhound that has been bonded through GRS, that bond stays with them until they actually properly retire. So if they go for breeding or if they go to get sold on for a flapping track, that bond stays with that greyhound. And when it does actually properly retire to a home or to a home, one of our approved homing centres, then we do still release that bond, even if it's 3-4 years after they finished the GBGB licensed racing.
And will the bond amount have increased by virtue of the fact that it's been held in an investment type account, or is it a flat number?
No, it is a flat number.
Yeah.
It's what is affordable at this time. This is a step change. I'm not saying that it won't change going forward, and I will do everything in my power to get that bond increased from 400 But at this present time, with this present situation, bearing in mind that some of our independent charities never received any financial assistance from us, £400, they're actually blown away by even just that gesture.
Yeah.
Yeah, very heartwarming speaking to them.
Let's talk a little bit about the what the rehoming process in the UK is like. In other words, the Greyhound comes into the rehoming center and is kind of put in their census of who they have. I suspect that, and from what I've seen on the internet, the adoptable Greyhounds photos are put up on the rehoming center's website so that prospective adopters can kind of look and see what they've got. Take us from there. How does the application process work? How does the screening process work, and so forth?
Yeah, so if we start with the Greyhound side of things, the Greyhound will go to a homing centre. Any history, veterinary treatment, any information that can be provided, bearing in mind that the owner trainer knows that Greyhound better than anybody else. They've spent the most time with them over, the years before they were retiring. That information gets given to the homing centre as much as possible. The homing centre then do their own assessments. They put the Greyhound, maybe on their website or on Facebook to say new arrival, what type of temperament the Greyhound has, whether it's going to be okay with, cat friendly, like I spoke of before, whether it's going to be okay with older children or, those kinds of scenarios. And then the homing centre will normally go out to speak with the potential new owner, find out what their lifestyle is and what they're looking for in their Greyhounds. They'll then, if they have a suitable Greyhound for that particular family, they will then go and do a home check to see where the Greyhound will be living, that there's secure fencing around their garden, because Greyhounds do get spooked, and therefore having a secure place where that Greyhound can go, safe, secure place, is really important. Once they've gone through that home check process, they then go to get invited to normal circumstances, get invited to the homing centre to meet the Greyhound if they have another dog for that pet to go along to, see how they get on. And then if that all goes well, then they sign the adoption paperwork. All of our approved homing centres, the criteria of them being approved is that they have a returns policy. So if for any reason that Greyhound didn't work out in that home, it's really important for us to know that the charity will actually take the Greyhounds back, so that it doesn't end up, where we lose the trail of where that Greyhound is. So that's one of our policies that has to be in place for me to be able to approve a homing centre. And then the Greyhound goes to the new home, lives there happily ever after.
Is an adoption fee paid by the adopter?
Yes. So different charities have different amounts and everything, sort of average amount for adopting a Greyhound. And this may have changed, obviously, because of the COVID situation, but it's asking for a sort of reasonable donation of 100 to 150. It may be, a lot of it is donation, which means that we have a gift aid, a government-backed gift aid scheme here. So if it's gift aided, whatever donation is made, the government gives an extra 25% to that charity. So yeah, it's kind of a recommended amount. It's not set in stone. And sometimes it can be lower, because if it's a dog that has maybe a bit of a medical issue or something, it may be that they're not asked for as large a donation because of the ongoing costs. So it does vary, but yes, there is an adoption amount that will be paid to the charity.
And then does the adopter sign what we over here call an adoption contract that has certain requirements the most important one being, of course, if they can't keep the Greyhound, it comes back to the rehoming center.
Yes.
Is there an
yeah.
actual legal document signed like we use over here?
Yes, there is. Yeah. And also, if they pass the dog on to be homed to somebody else, then the homing centre needs to be informed. So all of it's the other criteria. The homing policy is one of the criteria that I have to see is met before I can approve the homing centre. So I always ask for a copy of their adoption contract, as you call it.
Mm-hmm. What's the staffing of the rehoming centers like? In other words, are they all volunteers, or there's some paid staff? How does that work with most rehoming centers?
Most rehoming centres, most rehoming centres, even if they have paid staff to sort out the core duties of the running of the centre, they all have volunteers who go and help do assessments, or they might have volunteer dog walkers. A few of our centres kind of have pat dogs where they therapy, so they'll take greyhounds to nursing homes or centres, where the greyhound can interact with people who might need that little bit of animal substance, but an animal fix, greyhound fix. So lots of voluntary work is carried out in this country, especially. Like yours, I imagine.
How many of or about what percentage of rehoming centers have their own kennel space versus, say, having all their adoptable greyhounds in foster homes while they're waiting to be adopted?
So quite a few of our homing centres do have the capability of foster arrangements as well. Normally, it would be sort of a handful of foster homes. So if there's a greyhound that isn't coping particularly well, or has a medical issue, or just needs that extra bit of care and attention, it has the potential of going into a foster home to help prepare it for its forever home. So trying to think on the number. I know that Greyhound Trust, 40 branches. I couldn't say for certain, but there are foster carers out there that work with the homing centres as volunteers as usual. So help with that transition if it's needed for the greyhounds.
What are most of the rehoming centers greyhounds only, or do some of them handle greyhounds and other breeds or lurchers or that sort of thing?
Yes, we have a mixed bag of homing centres, and I had a look at it because I thought you may ask this, and I've had a look, and 5%. So we've got 125 approved homing centres at the moment. 55% of those are actually greyhound specific only, and the remaining 45% are mixed breed centres. So our larger charities like Dogs Trust, Blue Cross that we have over here, and a few smaller animal welfare charities that work closely with our owners and trainers, but also take in other breeds of dog as well.
Yeah. Now, before the lockdowns, before a pandemic came along, were any of the rehoming centers exporting greyhounds to Western European countries? I know that the Irish folks send some to Italy, some to Germany, and that sort of thing. Were the British rehoming centers participating in that sort of across the channel work?
Very, very small amounts, and it was, and this is from my working at Greyhound Trust, Czech Republic, and I'm trying to think where the other one, but it was very, very minimal, and it would be just a specific homing centre in Europe that those greyhounds would be sent to. So fully knowledgeable on where they were going, and the setup. So, but no, we have so many homing opportunities here that we don't necessarily need to send quite as many across the water.
Yeah. What do you look into your crystal ball, and once the kind of the rush of applications from the lockdown that's occurred, and that backlog is fulfilled, and you then kind of are back to normal operations, both in terms of registrations, breeding, the tracks that are operating, do you think you'll once again have a surplus of greyhounds that have, in other words, there'll be more greyhounds at any given one time than there are homes at that same time, and you kind of have to wait for the home system to absorb those surplus greyhounds?
I'm hoping. I mean, we are in this unique situation, but one of the positives that can be taken from this is that I have been able to spend a lot more time building relationships, networking with homing centres, not just our greyhound ones and the smaller ones, but also ones that may not even have considered taking in retired greyhounds for the rehoming process. So because of this situation, and because I'm not so traveling out there quite so much to and it's a new scheme, so it's going to get busier and busier, but the future, I think the future is good. It's bright. I don't have a specific number of homing centres that I actually want to get on board. It can go through the roof. More homing centres that we actually have and are able to approve, the more options our owners, trainers have on where they can send their greyhounds for retirement. So we're doing the sort of legwork now for what happens in maybe a year or two's time, for when things get back to normal. So I'm hoping this extra effort on this side now pays off when we need it later on.
Do you try to have a presence either? Well, I know that's a new position and you're new to it, but do you think that when you have some of the big stakes races and the high profile events like that, that that you'll be present, and the rehoming community will be represented at the big events?
Yes, absolutely, and that's part of my role, is to not only network and work with the homing centres and the retirement side, but also to be there, visible, and meeting with owners, trainers, meeting with the stadiums that have been really supportive, and just building relationships all around. I'm from welfare and charity side. I want to learn more about the racing side, because I've only really dealt with the welfare side. So because of this situation, I haven't actually been able to go and visit a stadium yet. I have been to a couple of races in the past, but it's one of the things I'm very excited about. It's nice to concentrate on the homing centres, because we can't do any of this without them. They're superb. I'm looking forward to getting out and about in the future. Meeting some of the owners and trainers that I've spoken to on the phone for the last 6 months will be great.
Yeah, I can imagine. You might even become a racing fan yourself and just go for your own pleasure to go to the dogs.
Oh no, I've been for my own pleasure to go just only a couple of times. Busy life.
Did it ever turn out that any of the greyhounds you fostered or adopted, you'd actually seen them race just by happenstance?
So we in the UK, we have this which is new. So I found out the history naturally, 20 years ago, about my first greyhound. But we have a fantastic volunteer-run group, Your Greyhounds History.
Yes, I'm familiar with them.
Yeah, fantastic. So they will, we're working with them. We've helped them produce leaflets which have been sent out to all our approved homing centres. So they hand out with every greyhound that gets rehomed, and it gives them, they can go onto Facebook and have the history of their particular greyhounds. They can find out the history, basically. And our greyhound ambassadors also have produced a certificate that the homing centres can complete, which gives the details of the, it's a certificate on the racing career of that greyhound. so it goes with the owner,
Uh-huh.
the new owner. So,
And do the rehoming centers encourage the adopters to be in touch with the racing owner?
yes,
Maybe
that's
get
what.
puppy pictures and that sort of thing?
Yeah, and that's what's happening on this Your Greyhounds History Facebook page. If you go onto it, lots of times you see, could we have a picture of Charlie as a puppy? So it's great, and we're helping promote that as well, because it just helps show, and our owners and trainers as well. They have had those dogs for quite a period of time, years, and they do get sad to see them go. So
Sure.
knowing where they've gone and having that interaction just helps both sides, the new owner plus the previous owner who might be missing them. So it's really good to have that network available as well.
We've talked about the funding of the rehoming process, and I know sometimes, a greyhound will come with an injury
Yes.
that needs to be attended to and fixed and rehabbed. Who typically pays? Let's just say you have a fractured hock, and that's going to have to, be orthopedically repaired. How is the funding of that cost spread out among owner, rehoming center, et cetera?
So we have, and this is down to before my time, the Greyhounds, the GBGB board brought in Greyhounds commitment in 2018. Part of that was an injury recovery scheme. So if there was an instance where there was an injury at a track, GBGB would help towards financing that medical treatment, alongside with the owner and potentially the homing centre as well, depending on the cost involved with it. But all three would be involved in the dealing with that in that treatment.
And if the greyhound, it's let's just say it sustains an injury, which is obviously it's not going to return to racing because of the severity of it. Where does the greyhound go first? Obviously checked over by the vet, and then pending either the surgery or after the surgery, do they typically stay with the trainer, or do they go right to the rehoming center?
No, they'll more than likely. Well, some owners and trainers will keep them as a pet, or they will go to a rehoming centre, and this is where the foster side of things can come into play sometimes, where rather than that greyhound, recovering in a homing centre, they actually go into a foster situation. But more often than not, we want the greyhound going to the rehoming centre after its treatments, when it's more recovered, than going to a homing centre straight away.
Yeah. And does the fund, is it usually able to pay for 100% of the treatment costs, or does that sometimes fall on some of the expenses falling on the rehoming center?
Yeah, so some of the expense could fall on the rehoming centre. We do what we can, but we do have limited funds, unfortunately. So what we try and do is assist with the owner's contribution side. So the owner contributes to the medical cost. We contribute, and then homing centre may contribute as well if the costs go above and beyond what we can actually fund.
Yeah. What about puppies? We have over here what we sometimes call oops litters, accidental breedings, where they don't know who the father is necessarily. They're not registerable for one reason or another, so they need to be put into the rehoming network. Do your rehoming centers get puppies very often for adoption?
They don't get them very often, actually, because more often than not, they're kind of 12, 18 months old. I mean, they are still classed as puppies, obviously, but they are large puppies. So they tend to not get very, the really young puppies in. They may be 18 months to 2 years old. And that is the circumstance at the moment, that they aren't registered with GBGB, so they don't fall under our bond detail. I know that, going forward, it's something that we are going to closely look at, but there are lots of puppies out there that won't necessarily reach it to trials or racing, in the UK under our registered tracks. So it's something that we are mindful of, but we can't regulate those at the moment because they're not officially on our radar.
Yeah. They get snapped up over here pretty quickly because lots of people want a Greyhound puppy, and they usually have no trouble at all placing them. Because obviously, the younger they are, the cuter they are, and so people see the pictures on the website. Oh, I must have that one. So and they're all it's a rarity, and it's even more rare now, of course, because of the breeding numbers are so far down.
Yeah.
One last thing I wanted to ask you about, especially here in recent past in the U.S., the contrast has been starkly drawn between Greyhound adoption groups based on their position on racing, neutral, pro, anti, etc. Is that the case in the UK, or do they tend not to fall into the categories that starkly?
No, you've pretty much got the categories right. There's three main categories, like you just said. There's the pro racing. There's the ambivalents that don't really have a mindset either way. They just want to do the best they can for homing the greyhounds. And then we do have, like it sounds like you do too, the anti-racing fraction as well. So
does the GBGB, in terms of the groups it approves, does it draw any distinction in terms of, for example, the NGA has an approved list over here, and a group has to be either neutral or pro racing. They don't put anti-racing groups on their approved list. What is the GBG
that's
follow?
Really, that's the same here. To be honest, because we any Greyhound homing centre that wishes to be on our approved list gets put on. All of them are on our website. For that, you can look for the area in UK and have a link to that particular homing centre charity. So there's not many anti-racing charities that have requested with me to become approved.
They know better.
And part of my research before I approve a homing centre is to actually just check their sort of Facebook information, their social media, their website, and I am really pleased because of being in the welfare side for over 20 years. I have actually managed to work with a few that actually were anti. One specifically was, but have changed their viewpoint based on history and how things have changed. And they're now one of our approved homing centres, and I'm really pleased. They're really good to work with, and they do a great job. And they've changed their views, which is even better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're here at the end of our hour. I certainly feel like I've learned a lot about British Greyhound adoption, and I think you're going to do a great job in this new position. And I know you're the envy of a lot of Greyhound adoption volunteers that would love to be able to, that's how they earn their living, is to be involved in Greyhound adoption. So congratulations on the position, and good luck with it. And I'm sure we'll be in touch from time to time. We'll have you back after a year or so to see how the new program's going, and post COVID, what's happening with Greyhound adoption in the UK. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, John.
Thanks so much for listening to the show. You can follow Greyhound Nation wherever you get your podcasts. Do you have a smart speaker at home? It's good for more than just kitchen timers and turning on lights. The next time you want to listen, ask it to play the latest episode of Greyhound Nation. If you've been listening to the show for a while, we'd love to hear from you. Get us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. You can also write to us via the contact form on our website, greyhoundnation.dog. That's greyhoundnation.dog. We're also on Facebook. Search for our Grey Nation Show page. You can also tweet at us. It's at Grey Nation Show on Twitter. If you're an Instagram user, we're there too. Just follow us at Grey Nation Show. This episode was produced in collaboration with host John Parker. Our theme music was composed and performed by Dimitri Taras. Special thanks to this episode's guest, Paula Beniston, coordinator for the Greyhound Retirement Scheme with the Greyhound Board of Great Britain. You can learn about Paula and the board by visiting gbgb.org.uk. You can also follow them on Facebook and YouTube. Just search for Greyhound Board of Great Britain. I'm Michael Burns, and you've been listening to Greyhound Nation.